Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Nancy Drew. A great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I do think, and I really appreciate this because I am the person I am. I've talked about it countless times about always knowing how much the time frame of something is. So I like knowing that it's only been a week since season 2's finale because they referenced it earlier in the episode about the power outage happened a week ago, and that's when Temperance came to Horseshoe Bay. So it's okay, it's nice to get that time frame because it's interesting because season 2 started moments after season 1, but to be fair, that was pandemic reasons why because that was actually supposed to be originally part, the earlier episodes were supposed to originally be part of season 1, so it's that whole thing. But it just I really appreciate time frame stuff like that. But regardless, we are picking up with Nancy, planning to leave Horseshoe Bay to, hopefully get into Columbia because she wants to kind of go out there and have a fresh start, have a normal life. I mean, the supernatural has kind of dominated her life for the past little while. So it's, she wants a fresh start kind of away from everything else. Obviously, she's a Hudson. She's taken over her grandfather's business, but basically so that she can dissolve it. Obviously, so that they could actually help all of Everett's victims in the grand scheme of things. So I even love that she's being interviewed by Penn and Teller, so that's pretty dope. I think that was them as themselves interviewing her. But obviously readjusting to her life at home, living with both her dads, Carson and Ryan. So that's pretty dope. I'm just wait, you spent $600 on groceries? Variety and stuff like that. And it's just nuts. Nancy kept being where's my sorbet? And just I love that. And obviously, they dealt with the Phantom Knocker for it's 7 nights in a row of it. And just all right, just filing out a complaint. It's just but Ryan kept being yeah, my missing watch. What's up with that? So, but Nancy's trying to, also cutting back to stuff at the diner and everything, which George is throwing mad shade towards Nick's way. And I'm what's that all about? Because at first I was oh, did Nick not mention to anyone that they're engaged or something like that, but it turns out he didn't give George a yes yet, and that's what frustrated her so much, because it's I told him I give him a week to think about it, but I didn't actually think he'd take the week to actually think about it, and she's so frustrated by it. I love it. Obviously, there's things with Bess, she's getting it's just kind of she's trying out dating, but it's just kind of all because I don't think anyone's going to meet those standards, because obviously there was the Elizabeth situation, but she thought she found her soulmate in Odette, but she has to say goodbye to that. Obviously, she can never see Odette again because Odette wants George to be able to live the rest of her life, so she's not coming back out again. So it's right now I got to move on with my life, but no one can meet that standards. It's just no one comes close enough. It's just she's expediting things. She's not trying to move things slowly. I mean, to be fair, it's she's at an age where it's yeah, you need to move. It's okay to move slow. She ain't in her because when you get older, for people, it's nah, in your 30s or whatever. That's when people kind of at least that's what people say. You stop futzing around. You start getting serious about exactly what you want. You're not here to play games. It's you're trying to be upfront about it. So her perspective on things is kind of from an older perspective. To be fair, she was dating let's face it, an older woman, so I think that kind of plays a role in this of just once you found that person you made that deep connection with, and for things to end, not necessarily because you broke up, but just because she's inside of one of your best friend's bodies, and she wants to ensure that your best friend is able to live her life, even though it's shortened to the fullest, and doesn't want to waste take another second away from her. So it's it's complicated. So you have Ace with the whole thing with Amanda. He says that they're good, but Amanda's off kind of on what was it, some trail that she's taking. We also find out that Gil is off trying to find their long lost mother. But obviously, you can tell, Nancy's kind of avoiding Ace, but Ace is also kind of getting those vibes of, I think being off with Amanda, I think he might have already been feeling it when he left with Amanda, because we saw that thing at the end. He was just yeah, I'm feeling I'm forgetting something. And it's now that he's back, and I think even more so because Nancy is potentially leaving, I think it's got him thinking a lot about that. And obviously Nancy's got her feelings, and after her kind of quests last season to kind of deal with the Wraith, it put things in perspective to her about how she feels about Ace. Like I said, I'd kind of gotten those vibes for a while, and especially how Ace was about Gil being not a good guy and stuff like that. So A lot of that. But once again, Nancy back to trying to figure out what she's trying to do with her life. Like, obviously, she doesn't have any, so no more mysteries, no more murders or supernatural related stuff to keep her mind off. Like, she's at least preoccupying herself with this thing that's usually like a Hudson tradition. And it's like, yeah, it kind of got her mind off of worrying about Columbia. And so while she's in a cornfield, she ends up finding a dead body. And the guy's had his heart react, which immediately I'm like, oh, is temperance behind that? And that becomes a big, well, as they're investigating and stuff like that, they're trying to figure out, like, because I like that the rest of the team is kind of in on it too, which I love that, like, at one point, like, Nick just kisses George goodbye, and she's like, wait, that's it? Just, did you, Emma, I mean, did you see that? I love that. But obviously, it's like, she feels like she's not on Nick's mind, which Ace is like, no, just because he's silent doesn't mean he's not always thinking about you. And then he kind of looks ahead, and Nancy's talking to somebody. But I think that wasn't just meant for George and Nick. I think that was him speaking from his own personal experience with what he's kind of going through. But they're investigating this because immediately, like, because obviously it gives Nancy an outlet to kind of think about something other than worrying about Columbia and stuff like that, what her future and everything holds. So obviously the killer's threatening, like, hey, like, I'm going, like, a message for family, like, right, if you don't stop me in the next 12 hours, another victim's going to pop up. So they proceed to do their investigating, and I love that, like, they bring Ryan involved. He's like, whoa, like, some father-daughter bonding? And he's like, no, go, oh, come along. I like that a lot. But I was like, I do like that their relationship is developing. I really like the direction it's going. But also, like, Ace bailing out Bess from, like, her terrible date, I thought was kind of sweet. He's like, yeah, like, I'd never forget your, like, extraction word. But it's also like, oh, like, found, like, a box of, like, something, and it's like, oh, it's got Terry on it. Oh, it's there. Are you cheating on him? And it's like, no, like, but then he eventually opens up to her later on about what it is. He's actually doing a favor for Amanda and Gil's dad, because he recently got released, and he's trying to make, quote-unquote, amends to his victims, but as someone who kind of was in that lane, like, she's like, this is an easy, like, targeting a mark. It's like you start off with something small and then go bigger. It's like, fine, I'll keep out and look out from, like, Mr. Bobbsey, like, that he, make sure he's not manipulating me. But the fact is that, and once again, it's because of her background, Bess was able to kind of sniff that out immediately. But, because later on it does come out, like, Bess didn't see it, but Gene and Carson were talking about, like, some shady business going on, and those are at the center of it. It's like an analog form of communication, and he's the analog courier. I wonder, does Ace actually know what he's... Probably doesn't. He's an unwilling participant in this, kind of being dragged into this. He's trying to get in contact with Amanda. He's like, oh, I texted her, but she's, like, kind of on, like, a, like, summiting type of thing of, like, trying to, I don't know, figure things out, whatever the case may be. So she hasn't gotten back to him about what he's up to, like, with her dad and stuff like that. So I thought that was quite fascinating. But also, like I said, back to, like, the best thing of, like, oh yeah, my love life isn't where, like, a lot of those dates are kind of crashing and burning a little bit. She's like, once again, she's expediting a lot of stuff because she kind of already knows what she wants, and she's trying to find that instant connection like she did with Odette. Like, it was so deep and raw that it's like finding that again. It's like, it's like your soulmates, you're only supposed to have, like, one soulmate. It's at least how that's supposed to go, which kind of makes me think about the show Soulmates. I have to look into, like, when season 2 is coming out, because I know that show did get renewed for a second season, so I'm curious about it. If you've never seen that show, I highly recommend it. It's a anthology show about, soulmates and everything and the complications that come along with that, but it's a really, really interesting show. So I find that so fascinating. But it just, it's like, but supposedly you only have one soulmate. So it's like, once they're gone, it's kind of like, oh, it will kind of, make you sad and kind of make you think, like, yeah, no matter how much I try, I'm never actually going to find another person like that. So that's the complicated thing about believing in a soulmate, which is even deeper when you consider the fact is, well, she was a ghost, so it is just like, there was layers to, like, her being Bess's soulmate, so. I'd, didn't really touch on it yet, but this Matthew guy was obsessed with the Hudsons because he did, like, have, like, he stole Ryan's watch, but he'd also been keeping an eye on all the living Hudsons. That includes Ryan, Nancy as well as Everett, but it turns out like he was keeping track of the Hudson bloodline, and you're like, oh, so he must, and like he's all like got like biblical references and stuff like that happening. So you're like, okay, so he must already know about temperance to like get the bloodline and circle Nancy, because he must have figured out she was the 7th generation. So like how he knew what he knew, it's unclear. But ultimately they ended up, I forgot what that place is that they went, but it's a place from like last season, and Nancy's like, don't worry, this place may look haunted, but I already like exercised like all the phantoms here. And then like I love Ryan being like, oh, cool, you know, and he's like, I'm so proud of you. And she's like, if I was just kind of like a normal person like taking the subway, like would you be proud of me? He's like, right, you don't want to just be a billionaire waitress. It's like, yeah, but for him it's like no matter what she does, he will always be proud of her, like even if she wants to just live a normal life. But they end up meeting the potential creature behind all this, the person in the hat. And then Temperance reveals herself and saves them. And it's like, oh, I'm Temperance. It's like, how are you? Yeah, I used your blood to get younger. And it's just like, what are we dealing with? It's like, we should call the police. We got the killer right here. It's like, and Nancy's like, yeah, and explain that my 200-year-old great aunt is back, and that she's this witch. And it's like, yeah, like, how do we go about explaining that? And then Ace is like, I mean, we've dealt with weirder. I can't think of anything right now. It's like, this is a pretty wild situation to be in. Because he's even like, because Temperance is trying to spew it, turn it around like, oh, those were snowflakes. They didn't really know what I was up to. And it's like, yeah, the Wraith, yeah, that was kind of a mistake. But it's like, no, I'm not here to awaken what's beneath the town, even though I'm super about awakening the thing beneath the town. Why exactly? Who knows? Maybe she has such a grudge against this place that she's willing to like, no, I am going to destroy it. Or maybe it's like, almighty power is what I want, and this thing will grant me that. Or maybe it's kind of almost like a djinn type of thing of like, right, it's going to grant me whatever my deepest heart's desire is. Maybe it's a combination of all things. Because they never went into it, if I remember correctly, like what exactly the thing beneath Horseshoe Bay is. But aside from that, you know, she's trying to say like, oh, this is my home, and I just want to come home after like 7 generations. It's like, no, you don't just, you being you, don't just show up for no reason. And then she proceeds to kind of do a dickish thing and lay out the prophecies. And the question are these real prophecies that like, no, I'm reading the cards and this is going to happen? Or are they self-fulfilling prophecies that you're putting it in each and every one of their heads? And then eventually when one thing does go right, they'll start believing it, and they'll just become, like I said, self-sustaining prophecies of like, you need these to happen, or maybe these prophecies need to happen for your end goal to happen. Because it's like because each one, like especially the one, because the final one was basically one of you will basically embrace your destiny, and by doing that it will be the end of all of them. And I'm assuming, and I could be mistaken, that would be Nancy's, because one of them is going to be the end all be all to the town essentially. So I'd assume maybe that's like Nancy or Ryan. Like one was about betraying the others, one was about betraying your heart, losing your heart. And so I'm like, what I was wondering, it's like the rest will fall. Like, I'm wondering, did it mean like, if one of them embraces their destiny, then it's going to be a situation where all of them, as in like, because I didn't know if it was meant to be like, if the moment that one activates, that means the other 5 activate, or whether it's just referencing like, this one activates, the rest will fall. Like, your rest of your friends will, if you embrace your destiny, all the rest of the other 5 will die. Like, I didn't know how to fully interpret it. I thought initially that, but then I was also thinking like, right, if this card if that prophecy activates, then the rest of the cards would activate. That's we'll have to wait and see. Like I said, I lean more towards the death angle of like everyone else will die type of thing. But they were able to like stop they've gone against literal curses. They broke Odette's whole situation, so it's like they escaped death from that when that was kind of a surefire thing. So but once again, it is probably going to be the thing of like, yeah, like every one of those prophecies is going to come true. Question just becomes who's going to be who. You have your ideas about which ones are correlated to what. You'd assume like betraying your heart, like you will lose your heart. The lose your heart one, I feel like just because now they cut it like this in the trailer, but it's like at the time that was kind of being said, you see like Ace and Nancy. So you're kind of thinking that, but also betraying your true love. You'd assume that's like George and Nick, but who knows? So that's kind of gotten set in motion. But obviously Bess is initially thinking like, oh, it's got to be Temperance that's behind all these killings. But Nancy doesn't believe that to be the case. They actually look at the writings from Temperance and realize like the writing on the wall saying like, oh, kill again in 12 hours wasn't actually her. It was because her K's are different. But Nancy recognizes it as the punk teenagers that were at the restaurant earlier. And they were like, oh, you Nancy Drew, that like detective or something. It's like, put some respect on her name. Don't act like you don't know. Like, yeah, she is. She's like their number one celebrity in town. Like, put some respect on her name. She's been doing this for a while, you know? So I think that's kind of like, don't act like you don't know. Like, don't be one of those people like, oh, are you famous or something? It's like, shut up, you know. You're trying to act like you don't know, but you know. How can you not? Which Nancy did, like, well, it's interesting, too, because she was trying to, like, be on the liaison for the police. Granted, even like who she was talking to was like, yeah, you know, that's just like you like keeping records and like passing emails back and forth between like the police and like the town and letting them like, or the council to let them know like what's going on. That's about it. But for her, it's like, yeah, just one more thing she wanted added to like her credits to go to Columbia and stuff like that to make her seem more appealing. That even if they put her on a wait list, at the very least this could prevent them from putting her on a wait list and make it more likely like, oh, look at all this stuff that she has about herself. So but she ends up meeting the FBI profile, which interesting timing, just because, well, Leverage Redemption dropped the same day as this premiere, the second half of season 1 of Leverage Redemption. And the reason why I'm tying this all together is because he's a part of the Librarians, which there's actually an episode, the actual first episode, spoilers, kind of deals with a librarian, and just like there's ties into all that because Christian Kane and Noah Wiley are part of the show. So like it's a whole thing. But the actor who plays this FBI profiler, CW wise, he was on Pandora as Greg, but he was also a librarian. So like I said, the timing's just interesting. He's also doing an American accent in this because he's Australian. He's actually Australian. So that's really interesting. But I thought was interesting, like, because how Nancy kind of laid out her resume about, yeah, but it's like, the guy's like, no, we've already investigated them. They were doing a prank. One of them's out looking for a missing cat. So if you're looking for a case, it's that. But for him, it's like, yeah, I went to, like, Quantico, I became an FBI agent, like, after getting my psychology degree. So for him, it's like, I can recognize, like, the victim was found on your property. So makes you kind of like a little... you lose your objectivity when it comes to this case because of it. And I love that in that moment, Nancy was like, he legitimately baffled her, because I think it's also like she couldn't like argue against his point of like, right, this case is a little too close and personal for you to like have your objectivity to it. But then she gets her notice from Columbia, which she opens up to Ace about it later on. Turns out she wasn't able to get in. And then that line of like, they didn't want me. That's a complicated thing for Nancy, because it's just like, right, finding out all she found out about Lucy being her biological mom, and, you know, and like all the truths that she found out about herself, and now just kind of coming more to terms with who she is, just at the end of last season, kind of dealing with a lot of that. I think Columbia not wanting her almost was kind of a slap in the face of just kind of like all that she's kind of dealt with trying to figure herself out. If I remember correctly, and do correct me, like she wanted to go to Columbia so much too because Columbia is where her mom went, right? Not Lucy, but like her adopted mom, like Carson's wife. Like, so like, I think that's the reason why. I could be mistaken. I feel like that was like one of her big reasons why she wanted to go to Columbia in particular. But, you know, Ace tried to make her feel better, being like, you know, like a different college is going to recognize like how great you are. Because for her, it's like, because getting away was supposed to be her opportunity to kind of figure herself out and trying to reinvent herself. But it's like, nope. Like, you know, she found the bag that the cat mascot was kept in. And she's like, cool, this is a sign that I'm supposed to be stuck in Horseshoe Bay. And Ace is like, no, like, if it was like the universe's sign, it'd be bigger than that. And they proceed to find another dead body with a heart ripped out on it. It's one of the dudes who was looking for the cat. He was the other dude that was missing, because it's like a trio of like dudes, but the cop was only profiling like 2 of them because the other one was looking for the cat. And yeah, so it's like, cool, that's a big sign, and it's on top of your car too. So yeah, universe's sign of like, this is where you're supposed to be to an extent. But, you know, it's sad because that put a damper on the celebrations, because it turns out, like, you have George being so pissed at Nick, but then it's like, who's playing this music? And it turns out throughout the episodes, when when Bess was on her date with the bags, when they were at that store and Ace ended up picking up like a record, it's all been planned out. All three of her siblings are there. It's like, yeah, like, and even like Victoria going away like on their grandma's or somebody's dying. It's like, right, that's because she was picking up something for this. And it's like, it was all planned out. He just had to like, he's like, it's always been yes. I just had to like, wait on, he had to get the ring resized. He also had to wait for Victoria to send those items over. It was like a dragon and a phoenix, like what that like represents and stuff like that. It was a beautiful like proposal and everything. And it's she's like, give me a week to think. She's like, no, I'm kidding, just put a ring on my finger. I'm like, yeah. I even love that one of George's sisters tried to throw mad shade at Nancy. It's like, oh, Nancy didn't bring a gift. She's like, I was able to get like the warehouse and everything because, and also like I've got some cider, so I'm gonna go get that. So it was a beautiful moment. But it's like, it's not like she was more so dealing with the Columbia situation, trying to figure herself out, rather than like, because she was happy for like George and Nick. Obviously that was still kind of a touchy subject, but it's like, no, like she knows they're good for each other and she's happy for them. Because that was one thing too. George was worried that like she kind of felt like she threw a lot at Nick. It's like, oh, I asked you to marry me, and then on top of that, I told you I've only got maybe a decade left to live, so I kind of threw you a curveball there. But it's like, no. Nick is all about it, and he was just waiting for the right time. Just interesting that the right timing just happened to be around all of this. So hopefully that doesn't turn out to be a bad sign. I'm curious to see what the wedding's going to look like at the end of the day, too. Dude, I'm thinking way far in advance. Probably won't get that till like probably near the end of the season. We'll see. Maybe it'll end up happening earlier, but regardless, it's nice. Aside from all that, like after it was all said and done, though, the cops are at the scene of the crime and people are nearby and they're asking Nancy, like, what is she thinking? It's like, right, we don't have any answers right now, but the cops will handle it because she's trying to be respectful of, like, right, recognizing the FBI profile of the dude was right. It's like, I do have some, don't have the objectivity in this. So, and they're like, and if they don't solve it, will you? And Ace and the others kind of lead her away. But she shows up later on to give Nancy like, oh yeah, you would like, it's the election is not supposed to be next week, but she's officially been announced as the winner of like, because it was unanimous about her being like the liaison because she's the hero in the town because like you are our homeborn sleuth. So it's like, yeah, I love that. Like, yeah, she's like, here, when I got elected, I knew, like, I was a little sniffly, too. So she gives Nancy a napkin or whatever to dab her eyes. And it's like, here, she's like, nope, you keep it. So it all works out in the end. Because Ace did talk to Nancy about, like, no, you could always go to other schools because it's about, being out there kind of leaving stuff behind, like, because even Ace had brought that up earlier, like, oh, like, she's trying to forget, like, a lot of other stuff. It's almost like, are we kind of part of that thing that it's like, no, like, you guys are always going to be a permanent part of me, no matter where I go. Like, I'm not just going to, like, forget you guys or anything like that. But then it turns out, like, Nancy kind of realizes and they're like, no, this is exactly where I'm meant to be. I'm going to find this killer. And I'm also going to, I wonder, is that going to be like a multiple episode arc thing, or is that going to be like a recurring thing throughout the season? I'm curious, like, how, like this heart-stealing killer, because apparently they're saying, like, it's like the heart was frozen solid before being removed type of thing. Connor, the coroner, who they saved his son last season, it's like, yeah, this is kind of like a favor for them because of that. So, like, that kind of got brought up this episode. But, and it's like, yeah, figuring out what my, like, ancestor witch on the loose is all about. And then Carson's like, you're what on the loose? And it's like, oh, right, we got to fill you in about that. It's like, right, like, only the core group knows about it. Right, we got to tell you about that. Which they also did set up, like, because I love that, like, Ryan joked about, like, Carson being like a bachelor, because it's like, oh, you took in someone else's baby, so like you look like such an eligible bachelor. And he thought like Jean was kind of like hitting on him or whatever, and she was like, no, but it does seem like there might potentially be something there. He might want something there. He's trying to say like he's not in the right headspace for it, but we'll see if things kind of change later on down the road. But at the very end, though, we see the poor cat. She might not be connected to the murders, but it is interesting that the moment she rips down the barrier, all this, like, there's probably a lot of supernatural stuff from the outside. Like, Horseshoe Bay, it's most likely a nexus point. Well, more so like a beacon, like Beacon Hill from Teen Wolf. It's like Beacon Hill attracted to supernatural. Horseshoe Bay's always had ties to the supernatural. So either Temperance's presence here is drawing in the supernatural because this is all part of awakening what's down below. Like, so she's doing that on purpose. So she needs things to kind of play out a certain way, or it's just an inadvertent side effect of her trying to do it. It's just like the supernatural getting drawn here. Whatever the case may be, I think that's what is going to kind of happen. I think that's what's going to be happening. Like, even more supernatural activity is going to kick up, not just because Horseshoe Bay is Horseshoe Bay, but also it's attracting stuff from the outside. We'll see. I am curious to see, like, are we going to see a lot? Because I know the actor who plays Gil is also in on Freeform's Motherland Fort Salem. So, like, that's coming back for its third or final season. So I'm curious, like, how much he's going to be in that. So that might be indicative of whether or not he's going to be in this season a lot. Or not. And maybe we'll probably get to see more Amanda than him, you know, that type of thing. So we'll see. Also, because the FBI profile is going to be filling in for what, because Home Dude's off dealing with the Everett case. So Tamura is away for a while, so maybe he'll pop up later on, or maybe it's just like this FBI profile is going to be like the main fill-in, you know, in that time frame. So we'll see how that plays out too. But regardless, poor cat got its, I'm assuming its heart, it looked like, ripped out, and Temperance is squeezing it, and the bloodline trails and spans throughout. I guess like maybe those are kind of like the ley lines that cross throughout maybe like Horseshoe Bay that are kind of like the major like nexus points of like magic or something like that she's going to tap into. We don't fully know the grand scheme of what Temperance up to, but I'm excited to see where things take us this season in the grand scheme of things. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.